This is Reasonable Faith with Dr. William Lane Craig.
ReasonableFaith.org.
I was about the moral argument.
Yes.
I was talking with a few friends previously about the idea that we can't both say that there are no morals and yet still support a certain moral code. And their argument to this was that they weren't supporting a moral code. They were stating they were supporting their own opinions. And so they just simply replaced the term morals with the term opinions. And so they said, therefore, that it is possible for an atheist to support a certain opinion, say to denounce Hitler. And so I couldn't really come up with something that would convince them. So what would you say to people who would say something like that?
All right, let's bring up the moral argument, can we, on the screen? What is the atheist or the non-believer in this case questioning? He's admitting premise one, that if there is no God, then objective moral values and duties do not exist. What he's challenging is premise two. He says there's just moral opinions, but there are no moral values. And what I guess I would do is, if you're dealing with a sincere person rather than someone that's just putting up an intellectual smokescreen, just give him some examples of things. Say, you really don't think then that to rape and torture a little girl to death is morally wrong? You think that's morally indifferent?
I actually gave a similar example to that, and what they said, they have very strong opinions against that, and they will do everything in their power to fight that, but that is just their predetermined
That's just their opinion. That's right. So in other words, they don't really think that the pedophile and rapist does anything wrong, that it would be just fine to do that rather than to love the child, or that racial discrimination is just fine morally. He has an opinion against it, but that has no more validity than the opinion of the racist or the person who would discriminate against other people of that sort. And I think if you're dealing with a sincere person, they'll begin to see after a while that this is not really what they think, that they really do affirm that certain things are objectively right or wrong.
They actually say that, though. They actually say that, yes, I do believe that this is right. However, this is just my belief. And so it's kind of their own dichotomy that they're saying this.
Yeah,
So
I appreciate that. I guess what you might do then is ask them, well, why do you deny then our moral experience? We in moral experience, we apprehend the intrinsic worth of other human beings, and that it would be wrong to torture and abuse another person for fun's sake. Why do you deny that? And then let him give some reason for skepticism about that. And I think what you'll find is that there just aren't any good reasons for moral skepticism of that sort. Any argument that you can run for being skeptical about moral values, you could run a parallel argument for being skeptical about the reality of physical objects in the world. In the same way that we trust our sensory intuitions with respect to the reality of physical objects about us, we can trust our moral intuitions that there are certain moral values that objectively exist and duties that we objectively have. So that if he's going to be skeptical about these moral entities or realities, he ought to also be subjectively or skeptical about the reality of the physical world around him, which is, I think, just to push somebody into an untenable sort of skepticism.
So would his argument that society brought us up to believe in these morals be untenable because everybody does have this
well, no, it's not an appeal to universal opinion. It's more of this sort. When you ask non-believing ethicists why they think that premise 2 is true, and by the way, the vast majority of philosophers that I debate on this who are not theists, They don't deny premise two. They all affirm it. Why? Why is it that these unbelievers affirm the reality of objective moral values and duties? Well, Louise Antony, a philosopher at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, put it very nicely. She put it this way. She said, any argument for moral skepticism will be based upon premises that are less obviously true than the reality of moral values and duties themselves. And I think that's absolutely right. Any argument that the skeptic might give you to show that moral values and duties don't exist will be based on premises which are less obviously true than the reality of moral values and duties themselves. And therefore, you shouldn't believe those premises. You should instead believe what your moral experience tells you, that it's wrong to racially discriminate or to torture a little child to death. Because any argument for thinking that's all right is going to be based on premises that are less obviously true than those moral truths themselves.